In 2019, there were only two categories. There was public and there was private. And what that means is if somebody wanted to get access to the voter rolls, they have to pay for a big section of the voter roll. They can't just request the record for one voter. You have to request at least a Senate district, a House district, the city, something of a category, and you had to pay a fee to get those. But if you're if you're a candidate or the party, you could have gotten all of the voter roll.
But prior to 2019.
Yeah, before up till 2019.
Right.
But a member of the public that wanted it, they could only get those that were classified as public. But there was a bill that was passed in 2019 that went into effect on March 12th of 2020. And on that day, everybody that was in public, in that bill, there's a new category called withheld that was created. And you were supposed to have qualified for that, being a victim of domestic violence or dating violence, law enforcement officer, military, or a public figure as defined by election code. But when they made that withheld category, they took everybody that was in private and moved them to withheld, whether they qualified for that category or not. So on March 12th, 2020, there was like 85% were public and 15% that were private were moved to withheld. And from that point forward, if you wanted to be in withheld, you had to submit a request and you had to show how you qualified to be in withheld, or you could have selected you want to be private, which would have, again, hidden you from the public, but not the candidates or the party. And it went like that for, since 2020, for 6 years. In this last year, well, let me step back and explain a little bit about the circumstances. So when Cox and Lyman were running against each other, Cox got signatures, as well did others, but Lyman tried to get a hold of the petition packets, and he was only given the public records and not the private or withheld. So any voter that signed those petition packets and they were private or withheld, those records were withheld from Lyman. And I feel that was a conflation of the definition of private as contained in the election code and the definition of private as contained in the GRAMA code, which is the Government Records Access Management Act. And so using the definition of private in GRAMA and applying it to an election process, they were able to not have to reveal the voters that were classified as private. So that was kind of the first thing that happened. And then last summer, the lieutenant governor got sued to get access. The DOJ sued a lieutenant governor to get access to the voter rolls. And again, the lieutenant governor did not disclose the private or withheld. And so there's legislators that kind of threw their arms up and said, great, if you guys aren't going to turn it over, we're going to take the private category withheld, and we're going to get just the people that qualified for withheld to be in withheld. And I think I said something. They got rid of the private and they redid the withheld to now be called at risk. So with that, the private classification was completely stripped from the voter code, the election code, sorry. It's kind of complicated. I'm trying to do it quickly.
Did the private voters move into the withheld or to the public category?
No, the private were moved to the public, but they were sent a letter saying, we're moving you to public unless you can qualify for the at-risk. The new at-risk is basically everybody that actually qualified for the withheld since 2020, and all those people that were moved from public into withheld, they received a letter from the lieutenant governor's office saying, we're going to move you to public in 60 days unless you fill out this application or this request form verifying that you do qualify for the at-risk, which should have been done back in 2020. They never should have moved the public into withheld.
Aaron, I want to ask you a question about that because I actually read that bill and it seemed to me the wording of the bill, it did not even mention withheld. It only mentioned private. And what it said, and I read it a couple of times, and I specifically was looking for the wording withheld. And it was not mentioned in that bill.
No, you probably read at risk because they changed the name of that category to at risk instead of withheld.
Well, the way I understood it was that they changed or conflated, let's say, private and withheld together into one category called at risk. But it also seemed to me, as a lay person reading this, that it really didn't do away with the withheld category. It just renamed it.
Yeah, it renamed it to withheld, but there were a significant number of people that were moved off of the withheld and that are now private. I mean, a significant number.
I mean, that are now public, because there's
They're now public, yes.
Because it seemed to me that people could just opt back in willy-nilly, pretty much. Is that true?
There are some, if you could define yourself as a public figure was not very well defined in the new code. If you're a public or a private public figure, there's kind of a private public figure if you work for a private organization or you're a celebrity kind of status. But if you're a government worker, the public figure is very well defined. And if you're a government worker for a school district or any of that, you had to have received a threat of your safety to you or your property. So if you're a government employee, it's very restrictive still. You have to have received a threat. But now a threat is not defined specifically. But if you're a private person that owns a big company or involved in a big company, the threshold is you have to believe that you have a threat to your safety.
So there's the key word for me, though. It's like you have to believe. So if you check the box that you believe, that's all that's required. So
Correct.
they're not going to really follow up on that, are they? So anybody that says, I believe, for any reason, can get put into that category.
You have to sign an affidavit, but that's the...
Well, what's that worth, though?
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, and you can define what safety means.
You're right.
So
it's
not well defined.
I guess what I'm arguing, it was perceptually an improvement, but is it really? Because if you can opt back in so easily by signing an affidavit that says I'm at risk, then anybody could do that.
Yeah, you do have to have some celebrity status. You have to prove some celebrity status. So like if you're a student or you work at a grocery store or an office that there's no real identifiable threat, it's hard for people. And you know, there are a lot of people that submitted applications to me, and I called most of them and said, you know, you said you are you're a head of this company. Do you really, or I'm not really, but I said, do you believe that you have a risk of your safety if someone finds out your address? And a lot of them have just said, no, not really. I was just trying.